Hello guys, you are seeing Prime News Australia, where we show you the latest and important news of Australia in the fastest and reliable way. So come, let's start by not delaying. 25 big updates of the Australia, especially for you. Before proceeding in the video, comment by commenting from which state you are watching, and also like video, so that YouTube can reach this video to more people of Australia. This morning's news poll shows the coalition is down to just an 18% primary vote, while One Nation skyrockets to 27%. The breakdown of that is 15% to the Liberal Party and just 3% to the Nationals. Hume tells Sky News this morning that Susan Ley and David Littleproud are going to need to figure out how to get the opposition out of the hole they're stuck in and deliver a message that resonates with the public. Israel's President Isaac Herzog has arrived in Sydney for a 4-day trip to Australia to speak to survivors of the Bondi terror attack and their families. Herzog touched down this morning with his wife, Michael Herzog, according to the Israeli embassy. Israel's ambassador Amir Maimon met Herzog at the airport. The assistant minister to the Prime Minister, Patrick Gorman, was also there to receive Herzog at Sydney Airport. Members of Jewish community take out full-page newspaper ads condemning Herzog visit. Members of Australia's Jewish community have signed a letter saying Israeli President Isaac Herzog is not welcome in Australia, taking out full-page ads in The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald newspapers. The ads are organised by the Jewish Council of Australia, which has been a vocal critic of the Israeli government. Herzog's visit will lift the spirits of a pained community, Peak Jewish Body says. Other Jewish Peak bodies have welcomed the visit by Isaac Herzog, who arrived in Sydney earlier this morning. The Executive Council of Australian Jewry said the Jewish community warmly welcomes the arrival. Herzog is due to address community events and visit survivors of the Bondi terror attack. He will also travel to Canberra and Melbourne. The co-chief executive of the ECAJ, Alex Rivchin, said the visit will mean a great deal for victim families and survivors. Jane Hume has not minced her words this morning, and after telling Sky News this morning the coalition needed a reset, she spoke to reporters in the press gallery and called this morning's news poll an existential crisis. The Liberal senator and former frontbencher said there wouldn't be a single Liberal elected to the House of Representatives if the poll results continued. David Littleproud says the National Party has handled negotiations with the Liberal Party with dignity after making a deal on Sunday to reunite the coalition. Speaking to Sky News, the Nationals leader says his party left on principle and returned to the coalition on principle. The Prime Minister has done a couple of commercial radio interviews this morning and dug into the coalition's electoral woes. Anthony Albanese tells Nova Sydney that David Littleproud looked like a hostage next to Susan Ley at their joint press conference on Sunday, announcing that the two parties would reunite. Independents Helen Haynes, David Pocock, Sophie Scamps, Monique Ryan, and Fatima Payman are pushing the government to end placement poverty for health students doing their university degree placements. New survey data from the Health Students Alliance found 42% of health students are going hungry during placement. The intelligence agency ASIO says it has serious concerns about an episode of Four Corners on the Bondi Beach terror attack due to air tonight. In a lengthy statement, which ASIO said was issued in response to questions from the ABC, ASIO warned the ABC it could take further action if the broadcast includes claims the broadcaster cannot substantiate. Barnaby Joyce says Australians are reaching a, quote, snapping point on immigration as One Nation and its anti-immigration stance surges in the polls. The right-wing minor party recorded a 27% primary vote in today's news poll. Joyce, who defected to One Nation in December, told the Carl Stefanovich podcast that migrants who want to cause trouble should stay where they are. He said the government needs to consider how many houses have you got free, how many hospitals have you got working well, before deciding how many migrants should be allowed in Australia. The New South Wales Premier Chris Minns has repeated calls for calm ahead of planned protests against the visit by Israeli President Isaac Herzog, who has arrived in Sydney today. Speaking at a press conference earlier, Minns defended restrictions on public assemblies, including special major event powers invoked for the visit, which are the subject of a Supreme Court challenge by the Palestine Action Group this morning. The Israeli President Isaac Herzog has paid tribute to the victims of the Bondi terror attack and said the event was an attack on all Australians. Herzog has been speaking at the Bondi Memorial Site, where he said of the horrific anti-Semitic terror attack, "This very beach, beloved by the Australian people and symbolic of all that's great about this beautiful nation, became the scene of the deadliest terror attack in Australia's history. 15 innocent souls who gathered to celebrate Hanukkah, the Festival of Light, were massacred in cold blood by Islamic terrorists." Lawyers have argued that special powers handed to police by the Minns government for the duration of Israeli President Isaac Herzog's visit are so broad that it will apply to people living in areas wholly irrelevant to his visit. The Palestine Action Group is currently facing an urgent hearing against the state of NSW in the Supreme Court before Justice Robertson Wright, after the group launched a challenge to the New South Wales government's use of powers generally used to facilitate major events in the state, and which includes the ability for police to search people. Independent MP Zali Steggall has introduced a motion into the parliament calling on her colleagues to tone down the rhetoric around immigration. Steggall said politicians should engage in respectful and evidence-based debate on the issue, and that immigration is a fundamental contributor to Australia's economic strength, social fabric, and national resilience. She called out One Nation specifically for its anti-migrant rhetoric, racism, and hatred towards First Nations people to be included in Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion. The Minister for Indigenous Australians, Malarndirri McCarthy, says she spoke to the Attorney General about including racism and hatred towards First Nations people in the Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion. During Senate estimates on Monday, Greens Senator Larissa Waters asked McCarthy and the Chief Executive of the National Indigenous Australians Agency, Julianne Guevara, if either had asked the Attorney General to extend the RCASC terms of reference. Back to the Liberals, and Tim Wilson changes tack slightly to push Jim Chalmers on small business insolvencies. He claims Treasury has said that the government's small business incentive has just a 23% take-up rate, while last year a record 41,000 small businesses collapsed. Wilson takes aim at the Minister for Small Business, Anne Alley, who in Parliament last week was overheard saying that perhaps some of the businesses that were shut down were dodgy. Back to the crossbench, Sophie Scamps asks if the government will sanction Israeli institutions and officials linked to a settlement expansion in the occupied West Bank after Israel overnight approved new measures that attempt to legalize settlement expansion and land confiscation. She asks also whether the government will reiterate Australia's commitment to a two-state solution. The Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister, Richard Marles, takes the question and says there are already some sanctions in place and that the government does support a two-state solution. Justice for Palestine is considering a legal challenge against Queensland's new hate speech legislation, which would ban a number of pro-Palestinian protest phrases. Spokesperson Rehman Naji said the group hadn't been consulted on the legislation. We're considering a legal challenge. I'm not going to make confirmation now, but we're certainly seeking legal advice because we as a community have not been consulted. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has warned the United States that Iran will not tolerate the language of force and that Trump should respect it. This statement has come amid rising tensions and ahead of the second round of nuclear talks to be held in Oman. Iran remains firm on its right to uranium enrichment, while the United States is increasing its military deployment in the Gulf. Despite threats of war, Iran has said it will not abandon enrichment.